Cool.
Episode 2.
Episode 2. Cool. So this is the first official performance breakdown of like this whole new kind of direction we're going with the podcast. So yeah, this is our first time doing it, so we'll just see like what, frameworks develop from this. But our first performance that we're breaking down is a really badass performance. Ryan Gosling as K in Blade Runner 2049. Yeah. So I guess like just to dive in head first, what'd you think about it? What'd you like about it? And then we'll kind of like get real specific and nitty gritty later.
So okay, I've heard of the Blade Runner series for a while. Someone, oh my god, my nose. Someone we good now. Someone we went to school with, was really into it. Um, and we talk about it, and I just never got into it. And then I started seeing a lot of memes, specifically around 2049, and I just was interpreting those a certain way, and I was like, I feel like I want to get into that. That seems cool. I like that direction, and so I watched the first one, the first Blade Runner, and I was like, that was cool, a little dated, but it was cool. And then I watched the second one, and I don't know, it just was like it exceeded my expectations so much more. And everything I had interpreted from the internet was just completely wrong. And I think that is what really like it surprised me. And it was so much better than my interpretation of the scenes on their own, seeing it as a whole. And I really became like obsessed with that movie after I watched it for the first time. Just the soundtrack, the world, obviously the performance. Um, but that's what really stuck with me was that performance and how he doesn't have a lot of dialogue. It's very expressional. How he's an android, you know, and him just kind of finding his place in this world that it's the only world he knows, and it's the only place that he can't see himself doing anything else besides what he's programmed to do. And so whenever he gets this like uh, glimpse of something bigger, something to fit in with a crowd that he's never fit in with, and just how that motivates him to go against his programming. Something that's done a lot, but I feel like the way that it's executed in this movie is just really well done. And then only for him to ultimately find out that it was not him, and his desires and unhappiness with where he is, where he wants to be, just kind of fueled that delusion, only for it to smack him in the face later. And he didn't let that get him down, which I think is truly the like moving part of that story. He didn't stop. He wasn't like, "Oh, I am still a robot," and but that's not going to stop me from bringing who I thought I was, bringing the real you know born robot, the first one, back to her father, like how I've been trying to do, because that connection still mattered to him that much. And so I think about that all the time after I watch that movie. It's so powerful to me. Anyway,
That whole through line that you just like went over is really closely tied to the performance and like, when we get in the nitty gritty. But as far as like the big picture storytelling, I absolutely love the bait and switch of he's programmed, he's a robot. And obviously it's very allegorical for just like growing up in society and, being, conditioned by, your family or your religious group, like everything, right? There's that parallel there that you can draw like parallel yourself with. But the part where so he thinks he's the child, right? He thinks he's like the chosen one. He thinks he's something more than a robot, than like being programmed, right? And then when he finds out he isn't, the fact that he doesn't give in to like, oh, that it was just a dream, right? And he still does something about it is so cool and powerful because it's like it's so fucking cool. He was a real person the whole time, but he didn't think he was. And the second he had a glimpse of maybe he was, even when that glimpse turned out to be a lie, it was enough for him to realize I am a person and I'm going to do something about it. And he goes and he like goes and saves uh the father and brings him to the daughter as his final defiance to programming and being just a cog in the machine. And then he dies on his own terms. It was so awesome and beautiful. I love that story. As far as by the way, like most of the other performances were also really, really good in that movie. Like we're gonna, zero in on Ryan Gosling's performance, but man, I could see making an episode about his like AI girlfriend. Like her performance was really good. Harrison Ford's was it was pretty good. He was, kind of the old guy he always plays. Love, her performance was really good. Jared Leto was pretty good as well. Really slimy and terrible. Maybe the more I think about it, maybe this is the best performance to look at.
Yeah, no, it for sure is. I mean, I'd love Dave Bautista in the beginning.
Yeah.
Um, I wish he was in the movie more, but he's great. I think Agent K and Love are the two performances that stand out. Um,
Hmm.
but we're talking about K.
Yeah.
And Ryan Gosling's ability to convey so much dialogue with his face without saying anything.
Hmm.
Is there a particular scene that his performance that sticks with you from it?
So I'd say the kind of like his like climatic point in the whole movie, right? Um, I think is a good way to look at the performance as a whole to kind of like juxtapose things, right? So basically the moment where he thinks it really could be him and he's like in the room, I think he's with the actual daughter, right? Or the actual child, and he like screams like God fucking damn it, and like, that like really intense scene, right? That scene is really good because of the entire movie leading up to that. Everything was so subtle, everything was so restrained in, everything was so controlled and meticulous and sad and depressed. And then um like I don't know how long of a life he lived because he was created, right? But he's lived a life, right? And so he's lived this life just operating under this, assumption that he is just this robot, right? That he is just this cog in the machine. And the second he realizes that this whole time he probably was something else, it's like all like I think like the idea was his entire life he's like maybe had thoughts about it, right? But they've always been fleeting.
Like psyched himself out of it.
Yeah, exactly. And then the second he realizes that actually no, you're probably an actual person, it's like it just feels like a whole lifetime of like just this pent up like angst and like desire exploding out of nowhere, right? And it's also like as far as your viewing experience, really perfect time. It's like kind of somewhat midpoint, maybe a little closer to the end, right, of the movie when that happens, where he's just given this very solemn performance, this restrained performance, and then just this explosion happens, out of nowhere because of the realization he had.
I agree. I think that what he's going through, and he portrays it so well. You know, when you think something's coming, something you've thought about a lot, but you don't really want to view that as reality. And then whether it's positive or not, I mean, he's comfortable, obviously. He's really good at what he does. He has an AI girlfriend that he loves, and but he starts getting these hints that there could be a bigger picture, that the person that he's been told to hunt is himself, and that's just going to completely flip everything he knows. Obviously, there's that desire in him to be different, but I think there's also that hesitance because he's not going to be comfortable anymore. And whenever the dream maker, who is the daughter, says that his memories are real, kind of manipulatively, she doesn't say who they are, but she says they're real.
Never even
Um,
realized that.
yeah, and I think he just explodes, um, because he knows that, in his head, he's like, "Oh my god, this is what I was wanting, but did I I was also kinda hoping it wasn't gonna turn out like this because I'm gonna be on the run. What does being born really do for me?" So, yeah, him just exploding is it's so well done, and it's so deep. I'm so glad you wanted to talk about this scene because it kinda goes by pretty fast in the movie.
Yes, it
He
really does.
explodes, and then he just goes on to the next thing. One scene that it's kinda in the same light that sticks with me a lot is when he's walking around the children's home, and, he sees those furnaces that, uh, are in his dreams or in his memories, and you just there's just like a solid couple second shot of his face as he looks down the hall. And it's just, you can just see him thinking, like, okay, I know this is the place that I see. Is that horse there that's in my dreams that has the number on it? Right. And he decides to be courageous and go look. And he opens up that furnace, and the music sticks with me. It's like really chilling, and it's just like so tense. And I think it's kind of, he's going through the same thing where he's like, this is going to confirm or deny what I'm thinking. And he's opens up that furnace and pulls out that horse. And it's just, yeah, yeah, okay. And just the music like swelling, it just like, it makes your heart beat so fast. And it's just like one step closer to him fully believing he's the one or not. And there's that, and then I think it cuts after that to him back in his apartment with Joy, and he's in denial. And she's telling him like, you are, you always thought you were something bigger. I've always thought you were something bigger. This is proof. And he's just like, I don't know. What do I do with this? And it's his performance is just really, just his face there, because there's no dialogue. There's no dialogue prior to that. It is just, and he really doesn't change his face a lot, but there's something between his eyes and the music that's playing that what's going on in his head.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Real quick, to get a little technical, right, for the people who are interested in acting. This brings up, I think, what is my pillar of what I base all performances on, and like the idea of good acting and what I've used to try and make myself better and better. The whole idea of acting, right, is to lose yourself in the character, right? And when you do that through preparation or through it being improvised, whatever, right? I think the purest form, like when acting is just so real and it's just is so brilliant and really good, is when you are not thinking about anything other than what that character would be thinking in the moment, right? And then that will translate to a good performance. So in that moment, I think I felt it as well. Um, just like that, it's almost like it's like kind of excitement. It's like worry. It's ominous. There's like all these like things you're feeling when you're seeing him look down that hallway, right? And I think that's because I don't know this. I don't like know, how he goes about acting or whatever, Ryan Gosling, right? But if I were in that moment and I were trying to act that scene and display it the same way he did, I know that me as Kay, the character, in my head, I would be thinking like, oh shit, is this real? Or like, what if? Or I'm like replaying past events in my head and I'm thinking about like, what would this mean if this was true? Do I even want to go down this hallway? Like, those are the thoughts that are like flashing through his head more than likely, right? And that's what like conveys the really strong performance. So the technique is basically the best place you can be to give a good performance is to be so, if you're in theater, it's different because you have to know the entire show, right? And you have to do it in one take. With film acting, it's different because you're a little more lenient on that. You don't have to know all your lines and like everything all at once. You can focus on one scene, and oftentimes you get to improvise certain things. So you have a lot more leniency, right? It's like really different. With theater acting, it's like the idea would basically be that you have looked at these lines hundreds of thousands of times so that they're like breathing to you and you don't have to think about them, and you can focus on what your character would be thinking. That's when I've been in a flow state and felt like I gave my best performances, is when I'm not thinking they're saying this, my next line is going to be this, or after this I'm going to have to exit onto this side or whatever, right? Or it's like then I'm going to cross over here. If you're thinking those thoughts, your performance is going to be limited.
You're
But
already behind
yeah,
with your
exactly
character.
right.
Another thing that I saw a video on forever ago, that was the difference between like stage and film acting, is with your face. Because whenever you're on stage, I mean, people like 20 rows in the back can't really see your face all that well. So it is more bodily. You can't do it Agent K performance super well on stage.
Yeah, yeah.
They're just going to look kind of boring. While with film, they can get closer and you can convey those kind of unspoken emotions better.
If you're like, one more scene I want to bring up, if you're cool with moving on, is that's, oh my gosh, damn. That's okay. Well, I guess it's kind of preluded by this scene. So there's that one scene where he gets his girlfriend the emitter or whatever, so they can like walk around, right? And it's like they're on the rooftop and it's raining, and like he gets a voice message and she gets like paused. Like that's just messed up. Like to start, but that kind of is the prelude to the actual scene I want to talk about, and it's like the most memed or popular scene, right? Where he's walking out and he sees the advertisement for Joy, right? And just like that, I don't know. There's so many like emotions in that moment. And it's all he does is walk, he looks down and he slowly looks up. Very simple, like actions being taken place, but like the performance there is like just it's just one of the greatest shots in the movie, right? With like that color on his face and he's like looking up and it's raining and it's like there's this lost hopelessness, you know, that kind of starts the scene, especially because he realizes he was very attached, to his girlfriend and everything, but she's a product. And then he sees that product, right, being displayed, advertised in this, society. And I'm sure that just makes him feel even more hopeless and like there's no point to anything. But I don't know what he's thinking or what changes in him. I can't remember exactly what happens next in the movie where just this like intensity and this like drive and this anger and this like contempt and starts to like bleed over into his eyes as he gets more intense and he looks up. What happens right after that scene?
I believe that's when he decides to go rescue Harrison Ford.
Perfect. Yeah.
Because I think he just left the rebellion is when he's on the
Oh, right
bridge,
after he got his ass
right
beat.
after he found out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I'm about to drive a stake through your heart because this is something I realized probably on my second watching of the movie.
Yeah.
What was Joy to him? It was like a wife or a girlfriend, right? Something very romantic, very companion. In so you subtly see it earlier in the movie, but whenever during that scene, that particular advertisement, she's not being advertised as a wife or a companion. She is a sex toy.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
She is fully nude, and it's supposed to be to like give into your desires, right? So not only is he seeing that she's a product to everyone and not just an emotional partner for him, but that's not even what even she was even meant to be. That was
Yeah.
that's what he created, right? And that just seeing her just fully nude in front of the city being sold as like a sex doll, a virtual sex doll almost. It sucks.
Yeah, that's
Um,
crazy. I never realized that more than likely this whole time she just was like a sex doll, right? And he turned her into something more human than what her
because
purpose was.
because that's what he desires. He desires to be human. And once the first time I saw it, I was like, yeah, TNA sells. That's why that's in the movie. And the second time, I was like, oh my god, that's his wife that's being displayed like this in his mind. And that's really all that product was meant to be. And that might not be true, but that's my interpretation of that scene. I mean, why else is she naked as an advertisement? And I think when he's looking up at her, like what you're describing, realizing how much he's lost on this journey, and I'd imagine he's feeling what was even real. My entire life, I've come to find out is a lie. What was real, and the way that it's like what you said in his eyes. Whenever Ryan Gosling switches in his eyes from like lost to I can still do something about this. God, we could just talk about Ryan Gosling's eyes in this movie because that he uses them a lot.
That's the majority of his acting.
And I have to fully agree that it really takes getting in that character's headspace to do that. That's not something you can just, okay, I'm going to read my scene. Okay. Oh, I have no lines. Yay. I just go out there and look around. No, I mean, there is definitely effort and pre work put in to this character that he did to be able to flawlessly convey thoughts without
Yeah.
words. Um, Something that you don't see as much in mainstream movies. I would say Blade Runner 2049 was definitely advertised to be a mainstream movie.
Yeah, it's
Um,
one of the most artful, interesting, like, big budget mainstream movies maybe I've ever seen.
and what's great, whenever you're trying to like revamp a franchise or whatever, it's usually done pretty quickly. There's not, they're mostly cash grabs nowadays. But you can just tell the amount of work that went into this, and the amount of time that Ryan Gosling was given to prepare and how he used that time. And I think we only see him shirtless once, which is crazy for a Ryan Gosling movie. So I
Yeah.
think that's great. He was given time to focus on his character and his time wasn't filled with workouts. I feel like
So
that
funny.
unfortunately happens to him.
That makes sense. I mean, they even like made miniatures for the movie. That's so cool.
Yeah, and I think since it was a different writer director, it wasn't Ridley Scott doing it again. You see it from like a fan's point of view. You know, someone who loved the movie and they want to continue it. And I think that's what makes it, honestly, I mean, in a lot of ways better than the original.
Oh, but yeah, by a long shot for me.
Um, and I mean, Ryan Gosling has to at least appreciate the first film, if not be a fan of it himself. And I think that is what, just to get that emotionally involved. I mean, you have to like have some respect for what you're working on. And you know, some actors they take jobs because they're jobs, and you see that, and that's totally fine. That's their occupation. But it's these like what we're talking about with Ryan Gosling performance, how much effort he put into it, and how emotionally involved he gets. That's what I think makes a great actor from like a occupational actor.
Yeah. And some people, will go through phases whether they're more occupational than they are like artistic, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
But
you have to.
yeah. Oh shit. Oh, one thing to like kind of bring up, it's something like we'll talk more and more about as we do more of these, but like so the first movie was extremely like specific in like its genre, right? It was very hard-boiled detective meets
V-
sci-fi, right?
Very, you know, postmodern noir or whatever.
Yes, exactly. So, what's really interesting is, in the second movie, it's a little more fluid in like what it is. It's still heavily drawing from like both that noir and that sci-fi, right? But what was I gonna say? Basically, I wanted to somehow talk about, um, the idea of acting within genres because in a way, since Ryan Gosling's character is kind of like the new stand-in for what Harrison Ford's character was, he did have this kind of hard-boiled detective, uh, not role to fill, but like inspiration to draw from. That is somewhat in his performance, but really is way more interesting and nuanced than kind of the straightforward, thing it was in the first movie.
I agree. I think Ryan Gosling is one of those actors that could do so many different genres. As I hope we continue to talk about him, because this is very serious. I'd say it's a drama.
Yeah,
I'd say his performance is very dramatic, but it's very stoic. And I think he has other performances that um, display like despair. He's obviously very funny, very intelligently funny, not just stupid. I think my two favorite comedic Ryan Gosling performances are in Crazy Stupid Love and The Nice Guys. He
I love that movie.
also it's that's another comfort movie of mine, I think, The Nice Guys. And then also, I talked to you a little bit about it offline. I would love for you to check it out and hear your interpretation. But Lars and the Real Girl, where he is a kind of like a hermit, but wants to fall in love in a way that he feels he should, based on what he sees in the world, while also battling a lot of trauma he didn't know he had. So yeah, I think it'd be cool if we talk more Ryan Gosling in the future.
Oh yeah, for sure. Kind of like the idea of how the majority of acting is really reacting, right? And like kind of how that interplays with this performance. The only thing I can think of is we kind of went over the hallway scene and how basically all he's doing is just reacting to thoughts about he's having about it, right?
Yep.
Do you have
I
anything else?
You just made me remember what I forgot earlier. Um, so I was working with a director on a non-musical I was in back in 2021, and he was coaching conveying emotion, and he was like, you know, if you want to read a line angry, you don't think I'm going to read this really angry. You know, if it's like get out, you're gonna be like, I gotta be really angry sounding when I read this line. He's like, you really need to get into why that character's angry. He said, because you're not acting angry. The audience will perceive you as angry if you're acting how that character's feeling in the moment. you can't just think surface level like anger and hope that that's going to be perceived well. They might get, oh, okay, yeah, he's acting angry, but it's not going to be like as deep as if you're just like reading a line and be like, I'm going to say that I'm going to be sad when I read this. There's so much wrong with that sentence. But that kind of went in what we were talking about earlier. But I just wanted to say that because it fit in with what you were saying, and then I lost it. But that's what I was going to say. Is
Yeah. I mean,
you
that's
can't.
super awesome because that is basically really closely tied to that whole technique I talked about earlier, right? As far as like the thoughts you have in your head while you're acting. And the whole idea is to be a person. And it's like basically like how you live your life and how rapid your thoughts are and what kind of things you're thinking about while you're listening to someone else talk or while you're talking yourself. That's how you want that same, what's the word? Not necessarily energy. What's the word? It's like you want that same functionality to be happening while you are performing a part. So if I am Nathan and I think like, 1,000, thoughts a second, and then I'm playing John who thinks 200 thoughts a second, I need to try and be in that space where I'm only thinking, did I say 2,000 or 200? 200 thoughts a second, whatever John was, right? That's to do with the speed, but it's also the exact type of thoughts he would be having in that moment are different from the type of thoughts I would be having in that moment if I was in that experience. But also the different kind of thoughts. I would also have different thoughts as an actor trying to act a part. If I'm thinking as an actor trying to act a part, I'm not going to give a super great performance, and it's too surface level. But if I am John thinking, what would happen? I just found out that I got laid off. That's where the performance will come from. And so, again, like I feel like I'm gonna be angry or I'm gonna be sad is still too much an actor thinking about acting. You know what I mean? So I that's super awesome that you remember that and brought that up because I think that fits perfectly.
It's like in real life, whenever you're listening with an intent to respond versus whenever you're listening with an intent to understand. I think that plays huge into how well your performance is going to be. You're listening, like what you mentioned earlier, you're listening for your cue. Are you listening for how your character is going to respond? Acting is reacting. I think that sums it all up.
Damn,
Acting
that's
isn't
awesome.
isn't remembering your lines. Acting isn't remembering your props, your costume, remembering where you're looking,
Or
you
even
know,
conveying
or
things.
just yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, right. Acting is reacting. It's being in the moment. It's being in that character. I like it.
super awesome. Yeah, you got anything else for this performance? I think I've said the majority of what I wanted to say. I know there's other rabbit holes we could go down, but like any big picture stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's a 2 hour, 45-minute movie. There's so much I could talk about. But man, I'm just so thrilled that we did this again. Thank you for wanting me to be a part of this, and not just doing it on your own, although you would have done great. I'm so thrilled to be a part of it.
Thanks. No,
Um,
it's so much more fun to do it with you. To do it with someone in general, but also like, just the, history we have and like how we're really similar with a lot of the things we think, and that's like super gratifying, for both of us.
Yeah, I think our foundations for our thoughts are the same, and then we have been known to go separately on certain things, which I think is great. I don't remember specifically. I remember there was one of our previous podcasts where we just both
Oh yeah.
thought vastly different. Well, okay, one of them was our initial interpretation of in the whale where he starts overeating, and I was like,
Oh
"This is kind of
yeah.
gross," and you're like, "Well, he's trying to kill himself," and I was like, "Oh my god."
Yeah. And
Um,
I just had that moment in this talking about this performance when you were talking about how in that moment where he's looking up at the advertisement, it's like he made like this product that was supposed to be like, like the sex doll more than what it was. Like that is so much cooler because that's showing him being a person, but he's
without really being one,
yeah, it's showing him being a person without him believing he's a person. Like, damn, that's really good.
especially in that moment, because he just was straight up told that he's not a person in the
Yep.
previous scene. Next, episode 3.
Yeah.
Do we have a teaser of any sorts?
I don't know. Just talked about something dramatic. I'm really interested in talking more about comedy. So like, you want to do The Nice Guys? That would be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been wanting to rewatch that movie anyway.
Oh man,
You
it
just
has
gave
been
me an excuse to. It's
years. Yeah, it has been years since I've seen that movie. It'll be fun to watch.
been months for me. I watched that movie like probably once a year.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, let's do that. That'll be my pick, and then like yeah, if you've got one, you can say right now.
Let's talk about Chef.
What?
Let's talk about
Oh,
John
that would be
Favreau and Chef.
awesome.
Have you seen that movie?
Yeah,
Yeah, I like that movie a lot.
that
Very
is such a
lighthearted,
weird
warm,
movie. I love that movie.
but John
Okay,
Favreau,
cool.
he delivers.
Yeah, he does.
That was a good performance.
Awesome. All right, that sounds super cool. So Ryan Gosling in The Nice Guys, John Favreau in Chef. All right.
Nice. All right. Talk to you later.